Hey beer babes, just Will here, jumping in before the episode to let you know that we had such a fun time talking to Nathan, who's the head brewer at Boags. We shot this upstairs in their bar, which has got like a really cool museum that you should definitely check out. And there were a few people there checking it out while we were recording. So if you do hear a few groany floorboards, then that's was some lovely people coming to check it out. So this is a great episode. I think you're really going to like it. So make sure you watch all the way to the end. Bye. Hey beer babes, today we are at Boags Brewery and we're here talking to Nathan about some of the exciting stuff, some of the backstory, and just getting a bit extra information on a Tassie icon, really. So Nathan, to start with, we'd like to go back, and I was wondering maybe, because normally we're talking to craft brewers who are just starting out, but Boags has been around for hundreds of years. Do you know much about the history of Boags?
Yeah, so I suppose the brewery itself was founded in 1881, but the unique thing about the site that we brew on today is that it's probably the home of brewing in Australia.
Okay,
so
wow.
This site has had brewing occurring on it going right back to probably the early 1820s, with this block probably having several breweries on it at the time, and over time, as happens in the brewing industry, one brewery will buy out another, buy out another, and that's sort of where we end up with today. So the Cascade Brewery in Hobart is older than 1881, but our brewery is actually on the longest continually operating brewing site in Australia. So brewing has been happening here, for a very long period, close to 200 years.
Wow. So so this same sort of lot has brewed beer, and so eventually that sort of culminated in James Boags.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a long time to be making beer.
Yeah.
And when we talk about making beer, what's your personal background? Were you a home brewer before you got into this, or?
Yeah. So I grew up in Adelaide.
Okay.
And studied food science at university. But I suppose and brewing has a lot of science in it, and sort of that's where my undergrad sort of degree sort of led me down that pathway. So I've been in the industry well over 15 years, and that time sort of worked my way through a number of different roles around Australia, and
So
have a master's or master brewer qualification as well.
Okay,
So,
wow.
Yeah.
That's impressive. So have you worked in other breweries?
Yeah. So initially I worked at Lions Tui's site.
Okay.
But my first role there was actually creating new beers for all of the breweries in Australia and New Zealand. So they have a little pilot facility there where they create new products.
Okay.
And then, you'll go out and support, be it the 4X Brewery in Queensland or the Pride Brewery in New Zealand, scaling up that initial recipe to a production scale and working with the marketers and the brewers at the site to make them a success.
Yeah, it's really interesting. The more I talk to people in beer, the more because in your head you imagine it's sort of like this passion thing where people have been homebrewing, but there is so much science and background. Like a lot of the people doing who are opening these breweries now do come from a science background, whether it be agriculture or a formal science degree and stuff like that. It's really, really interesting how all that sort of comes together. So while I'm talking about smaller craft breweries, we've really sort of seen that industry take off lately. Lately's a stretch. It's been happening for a while. But how does Boags feel about that? So sort of you guys have been here for a long time. You've been doing it for a long time. What's craft beer sort of done for you guys?
I think I always say all beer is a craft. You spoke a little bit then about brewing being very scientific, but I suppose it's a science that's almost mastered by art in some ways.
Yeah.
Like the two practices sort of go hand in hand.
That's a really nice way to put it.
And I think the craft guys often work at the extremities of recipe and flavour. Often consistency between batches isn't required where you're doing lots of limited releases, whereas I suppose what we do on a large scale here is brew consistent high quality beers. and where we can, we make sure that they're sessionable, and that the beer you have today will be the same beer that you have tomorrow. And, we do a few different styles as well, which, in its own way is quite craft-like.
Yeah.
So,
and I suppose it's interesting to hear you say that, because that's something I was thinking before coming here today, because like I said, we've talked to a few craft breweries, which has been really good. I mean, we haven't had the opportunity to talk to any of the bigger boys in the industry. And so how do you get that consistency? Like, is it as simple as you stick to the recipe, or?
No, it's not just that. I think, probably unlike other adjacent sort of industries like the wine industry, where, they're renowned for having a vintage and a crop where every year the wine will taste different, and that's okay because of the season. In the brewing industry, if you have a pint of Boags Draft today, people expect it to taste the same as it tasted 12 months ago, even though the grain will have grown in a different season. The hops will have grown in a different season. The water quality might be changing. So I suppose the challenge for a brewer is to actually understand your incoming materials that you're brewing with, and understand them at that scientific level. And then know how to adjust your process to deliver a consistent product. And, have targets and hold yourself accountable to achieving them.
And that's it. And I suppose that's something that I'd never really considered, because, like you said, if I got a Boags here and a Boags another tap in 6 months, it would taste the same. And in my head, I'm just like, oh well, it must be easy to make the same thing. But like you're saying, it's very hard to make the same thing if all the ingredients are different every time. So yeah, I'd never really thought about it that way. So that's really cool. While we're talking about this consistency, we're Lonnie boys, and something that everybody this side of the state knows is that Boags is better than Cascade, and that's something that I think happens consistently. How do you think that's happened? Like, how do you think Boags has sort of risen to the top?
I think, the whole north-south divide thing in Tassie is just a classic. We're quite unique here in that, unlike most other big states where you have a big capital city and everyone lives there, Tassie's quite geographically dispersed.
Yeah, it is.
And we're quite parochial. You talk about Campbelltown being the divide where you can have a Cascade at one end of the main street and a Boags at the other end. And, I always say, that's why property prices in the north of the street are always so much better. 'Cause they're closer to a pub selling better beer. I think it's just developed over time. It's that classic north-south divide. Although, I think, without telling a lie, there's a lot more Boags drunk in the south these days than you'll definitely see Cascade drunk in the north, and I think that's probably just an indication that I think Boags has continued to invest in technology and in its people and in how we do business to make sure that the beer we taste today is constantly getting more consistent and closer to what people want every time they have a pint.
And I suppose that is right. When you go down to Hobart now, you can get a Boags, like, I wouldn't say every pub, but you can. But you'd be pretty hard pressed to find Cascade in Launceston. I'm sure there is.
I can't think of a place.
Yeah, like off the top of my head, I couldn't come up with one. And so that's really interesting. When we talk about beer, we always sort of like to finish talking with the same sort of question, Declan. And what is that question?
What beer do you like to drink?
I like to drink when I go into a pub what I think most people are drinking. I think fresh beer is good beer. So if I go into a pub and you watch what's being pulled on tap and you see half the pub or more are drinking a Boags Draft, I'll be straight in there drinking a Boags Draft. If it's more of a 3X sort of venue, more than happy to drink that as well.
That is interesting, because I'm finding more like we started this podcast because we didn't drink beer basically, and the other host Billy is not here today. He loves beer, so we got the spectrum. But I'm finding more, like you say, I'm drinking to the location. Like if I'm somewhere down the coast and there's a brewery there, I'll go there and I'll try what they've got going. But yeah, I think it's really interesting the way that sort of Boags has
built up, and you were saying that volume-wise, but it's the biggest brewery in Tassie.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
And I suppose to wrap up, I'd just like to say thank you very much for having a chat to us today. We're at the Boags Bar. Where are we? What's the location of this?
So we're on William Street.
William Street. Yeah.
Directly opposite the brewery.
Yep. Just over the road.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. So great place to stop in for a beer or a pizza, or just relax.
And is this fresh from the brewery? It comes straight across.
Yeah, I think we rolled that one across.
Now we're talking.
Just for you guys.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Nathan, thank you so much for having a chat to us. This has been really good.
Yeah.
I think the people at home will have gotten a lot out of it.
Great.
And thanks for taking the time to talk to us.
Awesome.
Cheers.
Thanks so much.